In this video, I'm going to show you a couple of different ways to graft a rootstock. On the two bigger pieces, we're going to try a whip and tongue, and on the two smaller pieces, we'll try a cleft graft. So I've just dug up this rootstock, and there's a couple of things that I need to do to prep it really fast. We're just going to pick off any leaves that are growing from the main trunk here because we don't necessarily want this to be growing. We want our new cultivars to be growing. And then I'm going to clip these one at a time whenever I'm starting to graft them to get rid of this expanding tissue that's on the end. And that way, when the plant starts sucking up juices and energy, it's going to go towards pushing out the buds on my dormant scion instead. So I just pulled this one out of the bag that was from the fridge from what I did. And this is a Donju pear that's going to go onto a rootstock. And the way that I have this rootstock trained in general is going to be really good for espaliering. Espaliering is when you grow a three-dimensional tree in two-dimensional space, usually alongside a fence. This one is destined to go alongside of a garage and kind of expand over the front of that garage. So the first thing I want to do is I want to take my scion and I want to see if there's a space on my rootstock that matches a little bit better than another place. And I think what I'm going to do is I'll start with this one here, and then I'll clip that off so I have a couple of buds on here, and then I'll graft the tip onto the other side. So I'm going to use this one stick in two locations on my rootstock, and then I'm going to put an Asian European fire blight resistant cultivar on top, and it's called Turnbull. Okay. So to start off, we need to make a fresh cut on our scion, and we need to make a space on our rootstock. Since we're going to do cleft on this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my rootstock essentially into a screwdriver, and then I'm going to make a cut through the middle on my rootstock here, and I'm going to wrap the two together. So I'm just going to get rid of this little bud here at the base, this little node, and I'm going to work with the inner node. I like working with the inner node best because you've got a lot of space that's straight in there, and so it's a little bit easier for your knife to go through. Whenever you're at the nodes, they're a little bit knobby, and so your cut doesn't end up being necessarily as straight. So I'm going to start here by just cutting this off. So I've got a fresh cut at the tip, and I'm going to cut this. And so I'm getting rid of the top growth there. And then I've got this wonderful little hand guard. I highly recommend people use hand guards, or else you're going to end up with scars on the insides of your fingers, because if your knife is sharp enough to cut through a tree, it's definitely sharp enough to cut through your finger. So I'm going to take my hand guard and I'm going to put it around the part of my rootstock so that I can just protect myself. And then I'm going to line this up so that it goes right down the middle, and I'm just going to make a cut that's probably going to go, I don't know, 3 centimeters or something like that. And then that's going to kind of stay closed just a little bit while I work with the other piece. I like making the straight cut first because you're kind of operating against time a little bit with them drying out or you touching them too much and them not working. Now I'm going to take my knife and I'm going to hold it here in my cheese center, and I'm going to slide the scion across it this way. I'm not going to cut a jagged cut or towards myself because, again, these knives are very sharp. So we're going to take this and we're going to cut it in a long straight piece, that if we can, okay? And that's going to be one side of my screwdriver, and then I'm going to do the exact same thing on the opposite side. And so I've got this really nice screwdriver piece. You can see on one side that it's a little bit more slender than on the other side. That's probably because we're going to end up having to line this up to one side or the other if our diameter is two different distances, okay? So we're going to take this lovely screwdriver. If your end is a little bit jagged, you can come back through and you can clip that end with your pair of clippers. The only part that really matters in contact with this is that green cambium layer that you see just underneath that layer of bark. That's where all our good parenchyma cells are going to be, that are going to try to form a new union with our rootstock. So I'm just going to take this, and if this was a really big piece, a lot of the grafting knives come with a spreader tool on the other side. So this is just a flat piece here, and you can use that spreader tool to open up your notch for inserting, so especially if this got really thin, then you're not just mooshing it and damaging it. And we're going to slide that right in and line it up as good as we can on one side. Okay, so there we go. I've slid it in there and I've lined it up pretty good. And now I'm going to wrap this. Since I want this to stay as an espalier, I'm going to favor this bud that's going to the outside edge so that it continues to grow in that direction. If I favored this bud or the one towards the back, it's just going to grow in the direction that we have it pointing. And since we want this to maintain the espalier structure, we want to just keep that bud that's going in that direction. So I can even just clip that off right here. I really only needed that little screwdriver and that little bud, and now we're going to get a whole new branch out of it. I'm going to take this bud, and since it's a little bit warmer this time of year, we probably wanted to do this in May, in March. There are different things that you graft in May. Before this would have started leafing out, but it should be fine, and it should push out this bud no problem. So now we're going to want to wrap it in this product called pear film. You can order this on Amazon, or sometimes they'll have it at grocery stores. This is a huge box of it that I've been working on for a couple of years now. But I like to use a full-size square. This does come in two different flavors. There's laboratory flavor and grafting flavor. I find that the grafting one isn't quite as durable as the laboratory grade, so I just go for laboratory grade. I like to have this square, and I'm going to take this square and I'm going to fold it in half. And then I'm going to warm it up in my hands a little bit before stretching it. It's called laboratory film. It's basically just like a waxy film, and over time, as your scion grows and expands, this will break down in the sun. And so then it'll just pop right off instead of restricting. Wow, see that? Look at that stretch. Oh, and if I stretch it too much, it just breaks off at the end. But it stretched pretty good for me. So I'm going to start from the base, and I'm going to wrap, and I'm going to put the most pressure on the base and then kind of lighten up a little bit as I go towards the top. And that's just going to really kind of hold that in place. If there was a little bit of light poking through, it would cover that up. And I'm going to wrap the whole scion in this case so that it doesn't dry out if the sun shines on it before it starts to bud out. This little bud will be strong enough to break through the pear film, so you don't have to worry about that as an issue. I did cover the top of it here too. Some people cover the top, some people don't cover the top. If your graft is really, really good, you probably don't need to use grafting rubber bands, but this was another thing that, like, I had to buy them by the pound anyways, so I pretty much just throw one on to any graft that I do, just to use them up and get rid of them, because I have so many. You don't want to use like broccoli rubber bands. Those degrade a little bit too fast in the sun, so it won't really hold your scion in place anyway. The other thing is, if a bird lands on this or something, this is just going to provide a little bit more stability to it, so it's a good idea. So I'm going to start that by holding it upwards with my thumb, and then I'm going to wrap the base of the rubber band with itself, and I'm going to keep wrapping. This is hard to do, guys, and the more you do of these, the weaker your fingers get. And so, you know, if you've been grafting all day long and you're on your 30th or 40th graft, sometimes this gets a little bit hard to do. I am not going to take the rubber band over the bud. If you do want to go beyond your bud, you would want to wrap above and below the rubber band, because although the bud is strong enough to push out through the pear film, it's not necessarily strong enough to push out through a rubber band, and so you would end up damaging it. I'm going to use my thumb here to pull it off to the side, and then I'm going to tuck that under that way, and then we'll pull it off like that. And if you didn't catch that on this first one, don't worry, we've got 3 more to go. Okay, so my first one is done. Now I'm going to work with my second one. I have the rest of my scion here. I can match the two together. It looks like this might even be a little bit thick if I'm trying to match the diameter here, so I may want to try to graft in this region up here. And again, I'm going to pay attention to which direction this bud is going to be going in, because I want them to go to the outside as the tree continues to espalier. You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by immediately pushing it into another direction. Okay, so I'm going to go with this inner node here and keep this bud. I'm going to clip this right above that node, so I've got this lovely long inner node to work with. So I'm going to make another cut in here then, the same way that we did the last one. But before I do that, I want to make sure I clean off my knife. And I'm just using an isopropyl alcohol mix. Some people like to use hydrogen peroxide. Mostly you're just trying to get off anything sticky because we're working with trees that have plant sap. And so your knife is going to get more sticky in between of each cut. And a sharp knife is a good knife, right? So we want to make sure that we're not using the stickiness to damage cell tissue as we're cutting. We want to make sure that our cuts are as good as possible. All right, so I got my hand guard on. This is pretty skinny, but we're going to take this and we're going to make a little cut here, right through the center. Go down about 3 centimeters or so. And now I'm going to take here and I'm going to make my screwdriver piece again. And we want to make sure that this bud has the possibility to go outward, right? So keep that in mind whenever you're making your cuts for what direction it should be going in. Okay, then we're going to do the one on the other side. Nice, long, skinny cut. Okay, you see how I have this jagged end here now? That's just going to kind of be in the way and make it so that your scion doesn't slide really nicely into your rootstock. So we're just going to give that a little trim. Just cut off that bad piece. Okay. Now we can take a look at this again and make sure that it's not too thick. It might be a little thick because we're putting this in something pretty tiny. Pay attention to where your bud is that's going to grow out. And slide. There we go. All right. And now we've got that nestled in that little V-notch there. Okay, so that looks good. Now we can wrap it, just like we did the other one. Oh, putting pressure on the other one. We don't want to do that. Here we go. Okay. And so these two were both cleft grafts. And that works really, really well. If you're going to learn how to do one kind of graft first, this is probably the one to do. I mean, it's just really, really simple. It's really easy. It's usually pretty successful. If you were going to, you know, go a little bit further, the more you practice with it, the better it'll go and the easier it'll get. The next graft that we're going to do is going to be whip and tongue, and those can be a little bit trickier, but we'll see how it goes. I like whip and tongue because it gives you a higher surface area to volume ratio of contact, and you'll see what I mean about that in a minute. Again, we're wrapping, and there we go. All right, so I'm going to wrap this. I'm going to clip it because I only want that little bud to go in that direction. I can wrap my bud with the rest of my tape here, or the rest of my pear film. Some people like to use freezer tape for doing this. That works okay for them. There's a lot of different ways you can do this, and you know, just kind of seeing how other people do it and trying a bunch of ways yourself, you're going to figure out what method you like the best. Some people like skinnier rubber bands, some people like fatter rubber bands, some people don't use rubber bands. Some people like to use that green, like landscaping tape stuff. That stuff doesn't really degrade in the sun quite as fast, and so you end up having to cut it off. All right, there we go, another one. Now, the most important part whenever you're doing a multi-grafted tree is going to be writing the label. So these are the D'Anjou pear. D-A-N-J-O-U, pear. And I like to put my initials. And then the date today is the 17th. Okay. And that's the two lower branches. All right, I'm going to stop this video because it looks like it's pretty long now, and I'll switch to doing the whip and tongue, and I'll do that as a separate thing.